A stunning 24 hours for the Georgia Bulldogs in a good way. Darian Kendrick, Eric Gilbert from Clemson and LSU, huge pickups for the Georgia Bulldogs. That happened Tuesday. Dean Legge, Matt DeBerry, we're here to talk about it. This is as a positive a development for Georgia going into the 21 season as you really could get. Kendrick, to me, Matt, is a guy that immediately solves a problem in the secondary. And quite frankly, Eric Gilbert does too, just at wide receiver, where George Pickens went out this spring. This is mastery of the transfer portal. This shows that Kirby Smart does not stop. It also sets up this 21 team as possibly the number one team in the country coming into the year. I don't think they are myself, but it's kind of hard to argue they're so far behind number one with the addition of these two players specifically.
Yeah, I mean, the rich get richer. I mean, this
Yeah.
team didn't have a lot of question marks going into the spring. Secondary was one of them. And then they had another question mark when George Pickens went down, and Kirby just continues to reload and add guys. So three transfers in the secondary already makes them one of the best in the conference. And again, that was a group that was one of the weaknesses on the team. You add Tyke Smith, put him at star. You add Kendrick, who started at Clemson multiple years. He's got first-round potential. And then you've got an Alabama, backup coming in to help you at safety. So, he's used the portal as well as any coach in the country, especially this year. And to add Kendrick and Gilbert this week, right when things are getting back going, college football is, starting to be a big deal again. This is the time of year where, teams start to make that move after the spring. And George's absolutely done that and added really two of the best players in the country, Dean, to this already loaded 2021 team. So if there's a question, Kirby's going to get that fixed, get it answered. He knows it's time, and we've talked about it for a while. It is time, and when you add guys like Kendrick and Tyke Smith, who an All-American, and now Eric Gilbert on offense, it's
So I'm glad you mentioned Smith as well. I do want to read something that Dog Post reported in 2021 at the beginning of the year, January 10th, 2021. Gilbert's transfer from LSU was not about being upset about playing time or Gilbert being frustrated with the Tigers' difficult year. His move to leave LSU came as a result of the way the Tigers dealt with Gilbert off the field. The specifics of what that was or is are a little less easy to confirm. Even a few days ago, Georgia insiders seemed cautious about talking about Gilbert being added to the program. It's hard to know if they're playing possum about that likelihood or if they really doubt it. This was not some certainty that Eric Gilbert would wind up at Georgia. In fact, I'm not sure there was a certainty that Eric would play in 2021 from what I had kind of heard that was out there. With that said, he had committed to Florida. Am I wrong? Yeah,
no,
so I
no.
forgot about that. This has been a long journey for him, and I think that it's going to continue to be a journey. I don't think that this is some simple thing and everything's cool with Eric Gilbert. The reason why he left LSU, I think, is always going to be something that people either misidentify or don't know enough to talk about. But I do think it was an uneasy time for him when he was in Baton Rouge. Now he's much closer to home. Matt, we were talking off air, and I was sort of skeptical. I said to you, I was skeptical that Eric would go back to LSU because of a lot of the stuff that he felt like didn't go the right way while he was in Baton Rouge, and these were not football things. So he's picked Georgia. He's going to enroll if he's not enrolled already. There wasn't any sort of big fancy announcement, but now he's at Georgia, and I think they've probably explained to him how they're going to care for him in a way that this sounds bad, in a way that LSU did not in terms of off the field health.
Help.
Yeah, there you go.
I think you're exactly right. And I do think a lot of members of his camp over there wanted him to be closer to home. I think a lot of them were very surprised when he picked LSU originally.
I think a lot of people were surprised when he picked LSU originally.
And I think some of them were surprised when he committed to Florida. I think he has a couple cousins, family members down there who said, hey, come, you have family here. Look at what you could do in this Florida offense. Got to know the coaches a little bit and said, you know what, maybe I should, look at other options and not go to another bad situation where maybe he's farther away from home again. So I've been told he's happy, and that is very good news for Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs. So again, if he's allowed to play, there's no doubt that this guy is going to make a big impact.
I have to feel like I have to give my speech again because some people didn't see the video before. Let me just make sure. Matt's saying if he can play. Right now, there is a rule in the conference in the SEC that you are not permitted to play immediately if you're an in-conference transfer. The NCAA has passed bylaws that will allow one-time transfers and players can play immediately. The SEC has not permitted that as of the recording of this. That could change by the end of this record. I mean, we don't know. But my suspicion is that Eric Gilbert will play in 2021. You reported earlier this week a couple of other things which were about academics and his physical health. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think as far as academics, I think he's on track. I've been told that he's good to go there. There are no more hurdles that he has to jump through. So I think a green light there is what I was told. So I don't think the academics are going to keep him off the field. If he isn't able to play, it's due to that bylaw that you talked about earlier. But man, it just gets you thinking, Dean. There's only one football. There's a lot of guys who want the football. And him coming in might mean someone leaves at the end of this year or at some point, because you're starting to have a crowded wide receiver, running back room, tight end room, whatever you want to call it. So,
well, you can't not take Eric Gilbert. Yeah, you can't not take Eric Gilbert. Let's not be ridiculous. I mean, you've got 10 receivers. Eric makes 11. The issue, and we should move towards this now, is when you get Kendrick in, that was totally a position of need like this second. I mean, you already brought Smith in. Smith can play immediately. We know that. Kendrick will be able to play immediately. We know that. Kendrick is basically going to play at Georgia for 6 months, and then he's going to leave. And 7 months, 8 months, whatever it is. It's not going to be long. They had to have a player at that spot, and now they've got him. He's the one that could be as monumental to this season moving forward as anyone. They already had a bunch of playmakers catching the ball, whether at tight end or receiver for Georgia. They needed help, and they got a pretty good, an all-ACC player. People always want to joke about the ACC. I mean, the top of the ACC is really good, and he's a good example of that.
Yeah, I know he's had some off-the-field concerns, left the team, entered the portal and all that. But like you said, very high reward, very low risk, since the guy's only going to be on campus for 6 months, and it's the 6 months where you need him. So, but he does fill a position, and he's a former 5-star. And this guy was talented from the very start. And he's a lockdown cover corner. Only had one interception, but that's because he broke away a ton of passes, and they didn't really go his way. Now, I do think he had a rough game against Ohio State. The guy's not perfect. I don't know if he can hit. I don't know how physical he is, but the guy can cover, and he's got ball skills, and he's long and athletic. So I haven't watched him enough to know if he can, be physical enough on the outside, helping the run game, but he's definitely going to help them in the passing game because there's not a lot of guys who can get open on Darian Kendrick.
Two things about Kendrick. Number one, I'm not aware of a Clemson player, period, that had a good game against Ohio State. So That was just maybe, they got railroaded. Secondly, you're glossing over the arrest for possession. A firearm. The police alleged that he fell asleep with a gun in his car, and he had marijuana in there. The marijuana was,
Flakes.
It's just kind of like they just threw that one in there. So that both are misdemeanors under South Carolina, the South Carolina Code. I do think that is a little concerning, just as a human being, the gun part. Not that he's going to hurt someone else. So I think, this is a chance for him to get right, to rehabilitate himself into a top 50 pick. You come to he played well for Clemson. Don't confuse yourself. This is an all-ACC guy. Clemson's good, but they don't just have dozens and dozens of players who are on the all-ACC list. So he was one of them. But that gives you the ability, if you're Georgia now, Matt, go with me through it here. That gives you the ability to set your secondary. Let's just say there are 5 people starting on the secondary, okay? I would assume Smith will start at star or safety or something like that. Lewis Seen is going to start. That's 2. And I think Chris Smith is going to start. That's 3. So those guys, 3 of those guys are safety. But is Seen going to play DB and I would imagine Kendrick will start. Okay, who is the final corner? Is it going to be Lewis Seen that moves over and Smith becomes a safety, or are we talking about Ahmed Speed, Ringo? Kimber was playing with the first team during. I mean, now you got more options suddenly. Now you don't have
Yeah.
a ton of depth, and you've got Nyland Green too.
Yeah. Well, the big question mark is the other corner spot. I think Brandon
Right.
Turnage, if he's allowed to play the transfer from Alabama, he could push Chris Smith for that Richard LeCount, safety spot where I think Lewis Seen has that other strong safety spot locked down, and then Tyke Smith with the star. But the other cornerback position, yeah, you're down to a veteran, Amir Speed, a long, kind of a crafty Jalen Kimber, five-star Keely
But young,
Ringo.
young.
Yeah, and
Ring,
these are
Ringo,
20.
Ringo, and Kimber have really never played at Georgia.
Right, right. And then you have the talented incoming freshman. That's going to be really tough to break the starting rotation now. But Kendrick has one cornerback spot locked down. Tyke Smith as the start. And even with they're in just a 4 defensive back set, Tyke Smith is not coming off the field.
I think. Well, I mean, I was just going to say, listen, when you got 4, you're okay, but you're going to be playing Clemson, the Gators. I don't know what Auburn's going to do, but there's a lot of teams that are going to go out there with 3 and 4, 5 receivers, and you're going to have to cover them, and you're not covering them with Mikael Sherman, I guess,
Right.
or
Well, Adam Anderson has played star before, but only in a very specific situation. I can see him in there when you are building so much depth there, and you have an All-American Tyke Smith there. That was such a big pickup. This one is too, but they really have changed that secondary, group around a whole lot.
I do want to, when you look at this globally and where they're at, I think they're at 85 now for scholarships, if I'm not mistaken. Eric Gilbert thing really just never died. It wasn't obvious that he was going to Georgia at any time, to me at least, knowing what we know. And then secondly, pulling Smith, pulling Turnage, pulling Kendrick, you upgraded the one spot in your secondary and on your team, the secondary, where you had to do it, Matt. What does this set up for this team in 21?
It sets up for a big ride, especially if that's Clemson. But the talent is there, and the question marks that we've had going into the spring seem like they're have been answered. We got to see it on the field, obviously, in the fall. But, if you're talking, I need a piece for this, Kirby went out and got it. And offensively, I do think they're really deep, and they're starting to become, deep in the secondary. But we talked about this being our, maybe the best defense in the country yet again. The offense, we've gone over and over about how that could be in their second year under JT Daniels, Todd Monken, the 2 running backs coming back. All of those young receivers. It's an exciting team because there's just so much potential. There's a lot of guys, like we've said, Nolan Smith and others on defense who need a money year. So there's a lot of guys who are hungry and want to take that next step. And eventually this program needs to take that final step. They've accomplished everything but that national championship. And Kirby's going for it this year, and we've seen it through the transfer portal, adding guys who can make an immediate impact. And again, if they can beat Clemson, the schedule sets up for this to be a special season. And we kind of say this, I don't want to say it every year because every year is different going into it, the schedule, the team, so on. But this could be possibly the year, Dean.
Well, in 20, you had a year that there were a lot of question marks, generally speaking. First of all, would you even play the year? And you knew then that you were playing Alabama away. That was going to be a tough one. This game against Clemson will set up the season. I mean, I hate calling games must win, but this is a critical game for them. Losing it gives you just no wiggle room at all, and you're going to have to play Alabama in the conference championship game anyway, assuming that they're there, which they usually
or
are.
Or a team better than
them.
Alabama.
So it's it's what it is. They've got 2 huge hurdles in their way, but then they've added these 4 people that they've added. I can't stress how good Eric Gilbert is enough to people because I just don't. I think when guys go to other schools, they kind of forget how good Eric Gilbert is as good a playmaker as Georgia people are going to see in a while. It may take a second or two for him to really flash. It took Darnell a second or two to flash. George Pickens, same thing. But this guy, he's not Darnell. He's not George Pickens. He's his own problem for defenses to have to deal with. It took JT Daniels a while, as it turns out, to get where he needed to go. So the transfer game is not always an easy answer, but I'll tell you right now, this sets up. Remember June 1st, because it will be a big day, because it could very well set up to where you're playing in the second week of January, and everybody knows what that means. It's not projecting, but it's certainly possible. Make sure you're joining us on DawgPost, DAWGPOST.com. Make sure you're hitting the newsletter, the Insider newsletter down below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.